like I said, things that, we're like, why did you do that? But whatever.
And I guess his son has a patent on all the interior boat lighting or something like that. Something, I can't remember what he said, but he said he had some type of patent on lighting in boats.
Really?
Nice.
That's cool.
I think we're ready to go.
Sounds, it's almost sad.
I adjourned the meeting.
I know, I'm like, Jeff's not here. Are you ready, Brendan? Yeah, I'm all right.
Jeff sometimes scoots in a little.
I would like to call this meeting of the zoning revision to order on January 4th, 2023, and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Pass it over to Councilman Michael.
So we might as well pick up where we left off, and Elliot had sent me an email. So you're saying what needs to be changed to SP3A?
Yeah, my recollection.
Because I thought I changed the one
I
item.
did too, but.
Because I had marked down animal husbandry, P3A
Yeah.
requirement should match page 2 and 10, which
Right.
I did make those changes,
I
so.
don't see, I looked at 10 and they didn't see, maybe the change of the, yeah, if you look at, the 2 is okay. But
Oh, yeah, there's some missing.
the changes on 10 did not get picked up.
Just the two middle ones.
Yeah, it should be under AR5.
Well, I mean, I thought, and this is why I didn't change it, is the fact that in an AR5, you want to keep it AR5.
That was the discussion, but
And in an AR3, it's already 3.
Right, but my point, which I think the board agreed with, was that,
But if I change it to P3A and an AR5, then someone's going to
well, but the idea was.
try to get away with 3 acres.
the front says P5A.
Right.
So it does, because that, it's a really valid point, but so it matches the 5 acres.
Oh, it does say 5A, you're right.
Yeah, so it matches.
Okay, 5A.
Okay,
But-
so,
And
okay.
maybe it's redundant, but I think everybody kind of thought it was better that way.
Okay, I got you.
Okay.
Okay, I misread it.
So
Okay.
then AR3 is the only
Should
one.
be 3A. Well, they both should say 5A and 3A, just like the one on page 2.
Right,
So
okay.
So they match on page 2, right? Okay, that's,
Oop. Sorry, people.
and the other things, I think, were just sort of, with some typographical things that I mentioned, but we don't have to go through those.
I didn't, were they in that email?
Yeah, I may have it here. Hang on. Let me see if I got all my stuff.
I mean, if it was the one before, I had already fixed it, but if this is something new.
Yeah, no, yeah, well, the ones we had talked about, but I think I didn't see them in here. That's why I reminded you. But, let me see. Here we go.
A principal and accessory was one of those.
No, this is not it. This is the thing from Shane. I will check it when I get home and resend it,
Okay.
because I can't find, I thought I had printed out a copy, but I guess not. So I will resend it. You know, they were just some little grammatical things, that was all.
Okay.
The only one of substance is the animal husbandry, which we've, excuse me, we have resolved, right.
Right.
All right.
So then in the further reason of having this meeting is to introduce changes that may not have been addressed in prior meetings that we think that we should capture. So I know that you guys were working with Jeff on some stuff, so.
Who's not here?
He's not here.
At the moment, but one that I have for sure, and that's probably, no, never mind. Hey, is 250-91. In 250-91 A6, it says a building permit
shall be void if construction is not started within a period of 1 year or completed within a period of 3 years of the date of said permit.
Right.
I am told that in section 112-4, that I know we are not covering here, it says that it is void after 1 year. And I know that Jeff, I believe it says 1 year, and I know that Jeff would like this to say 1 year as well, like, construction is not started or completed within a period of 1 year is what he would like to say. But
According to Mike, they give extensions all the time,
they do.
and they don't really make a fuss about it.
I think on the CO or something, it says that you have two, like, this is the thing, we have it, it's different on different places.
Different places.
And the CO says 2 years.
Right.
112-4 says 1 year. 250-91 says 3 years.
Well, of
So
course, it
he-
makes no sense.
So he
1
would
year.
like it to be 1 year across the board, and then it's not
Yeah, and
hard
then
to
they
get
can
an
just give
extension if they need it.
extensions.
But 1 year doesn't seem,
So, I mean, if we wanted to say, you know, construction started within a period of 1 year and completed within a period of 2 years,
think that
because
would-
that's what the CO says.
I would go with that.
Right. I do like that it has to be started within a year,
Right.
because I
Yeah.
think sometimes people get approvals and then
Right.
nothing happens and
Right.
things change, so.
Right, but now, in this day and age with shortages and things, 1 year can go by
Yes.
very quickly, so 2 years sounds reasonable.
And this may be the person that can answer the question. I'm going to put you right on the hot seat. 250-91, we're going to change that sentence to say, construction should be, is not started within a period of 1 year or completed within a period of 2 years?
2 years. Match the C of O.
Because the CO says 2 years. You added a whole lot of writing there.
Essentially, I combined the two sections. We have two sections of this, second page. We have two sections that deal with building permits, and they're contradictory.
Right.
So I combined the two into this 250-91, and that deals with the expiration date. So I was trying to find a copy for each, and it doesn't read that. I tried collating it, it was a nightmare.
So
could just write-
250-91 is the one section. What's the other section?
It's 112-2.
Okay, yes, Michael had just said that. Thank you. Sorry.
Well, this is a lot more extensive than what I was saying.
Because I'm combining the two.
You're combining the two. And then would we eliminate 112-4?
Yeah.
All right. The buildings. So how do we want to handle this? Do we want to, like, have me make copies of this for everyone and send them out to you, or do we want to read through them all right now? Because,
We're gonna meet in 2 weeks again?
yeah,
I'm going to go with scan and
scan
give
and
us
send
some
it to you.
time
Okay.
to.
Yeah.
And then I can print it out and it would be a bit more legible. But basically, it is just a combination.
It would be more legible if you typed it and
I
sent it.
know. It's easier for me to write as I'm going.
I gotta say, his writing isn't terrible. He's not like a doctor or anything. Okay. All right, so that, we'll deal with that one. And- Did you, how do we want to do this?
Well, I mean, I'll throw one out
Yeah, sure.
if we're at a stopping point here.
Round robin.
What's that?
I'm not gonna have much to say then.
Oh, okay. Okay, one of the issues that we've been wrestling with, and Dean would certainly remember this from his days on the zoning board, is the issue of plumbing
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
in accessory structures. And so, I mean, I don't have anything formal written up, but Jeff and I talked about this, and I talked to a couple of people on the ZBA and also on the planning board, and the consensus is that we should allow plumbing in accessory structures, not dwelling units, but accessory structures on properties that, even if they don't meet the minimum acre threshold, which they're required to do now. So if you have a 3-acre lot in a 5-acre district, right now, you can't put plumbing in an accessory structure.
But you can have an accessory structure.
You can have an accessory structure, but it has to be water-free. Okay, so the idea is, well, now with, people's lives are changing, home offices and such things as that, why not let people have the convenience? If the concern is that these accessory structures will turn into living units, dwelling units, which has been the primary concern all this time, then one way to deal with that issue is to say you can have a half bathroom. You can have a sink and you can have a commode. You can't have a kitchen, you can't have a shower. And so you can have a half bathroom if you have a little accessory dwelling unit accessory building rather that you turn into like a gym. You can work out, you can whatever, perspire, wash your hands. You can't take a shower, but at least you can wash your hands. And allow those without the necessity of requiring a special permit. Obviously, you would need a building permit to put those in. And of course,
Well, I'm okay with it.
Health
But
department.
did you write something up?
Health-
Yeah, what section are we
Health
talking about?
I don't know exactly what we're talking about. I mean, I'd be happy to write something up if the board thinks this is a reasonable idea.
Yeah, I'm okay with
We
it.
can write something up.
I would even say, I would even take away the half bath.
See, that's why I wanted to talk about it
Yeah.
first.
I don't see, doesn't feel right to me to write a zoning law because you think somebody might make it a dwelling unit. Like, it's our responsibility to make sure it's not a dwelling unit. I think if somebody wants a full bathroom, oh, he's getting comfortable
Yeah.
over there.
Why don't we should?
He's got to stand there all night.
I think if somebody wants a full bathroom and it's a gym or something like that, you know, I think we should allow it. Yes, there's a possibility that down the road they could turn it into dwelling, but so could somebody without ever asking anything, you know what I mean? I don't,
Yeah, my feeling on that is to have a dwelling, you'd want to have a kitchen and a full bath. So as long as we're not allowing plumbing for both of those,
That was the idea.
right.
yeah, then it makes sense.
But of
Yeah, I
course,
did
health
wri-
department approval required, obviously you
Right.
have to have health department.
I did write something up, and I can give you the copy.
Yeah. Oh,
So basically, what I was adding is a number 7, which would say accessory structures may be served by utilities such as gas, electric, and plumbing, which is just comparable to what's in section B, right?
what section are we talking about?
That's 250-22.
Okay.
And then a number 8 that says, "Nothing herein shall be determined to allow for an accessory structure to contain provisions for living, sleeping, cooking, and sanitation. Any structure so provisioned shall be deemed an accessory dwelling unit and must meet the requirements of 250-29 accessory dwelling units." And that's how it's defined in our law. It's an "and," so it's living, sleeping, cooking, and sanitation. And then add a number 9 that says, "No accessory structure shall be used as a dwelling as defined in this chapter." So it just furthers that, because dwelling is a different definition than accessory dwelling unit. And that
This is
deals with
under-
habitation.
Under capital letter A, is that where this is?
Capital letter A, this would be an add, a 7, an 8, and a 9,
Oh, so there are 3.
right? The first one allows for the utilities.
Right.
Second one says that it cannot contain provisions for living, sleeping, cooking, and sanitation. And the third says it shall not be used as a dwelling. So, and then the other thing we talked about with the planning board and with Shane was to require the addition of a signature block on the plans, that now if we approve this language, then this is the language that would go on that signature block, so that the applicant and the zoning administrator would sign, just so that there's some record of the owner actually acknowledging he's not going to turn it into a dwelling, which helps with enforcement.
Nice.
Do we need to specify anything about health department approval?
Yes, we should.
And also and a building permit as well? For example, let's say you already have a structure,
Mhm.
and, well, we do, for example, and we don't have a 5 acre, we have a minimum lot, so we don't have running water. What if we want to go back after the fact and put one in?
Mhm.
If this becomes legal? So do we go back to the original plan that we had from 10 years ago, or do we have a new plan? How does that, procedurally, how does
What we
that
found
work?
out recently from the health department is that if a principal structure has, say, 4 bedrooms, and somebody wants to add plumbing to an accessory structure that does not have a bedroom, then there's no upgrade to the septic. It remains a 4-bedroom septic, but it does still require health department approval because it involves excavation underground. And so we need to add that in as well. And you're right, that
Okay.
it should require health department approval. If they were to add an accessory dwelling, then they would have to actually increase the size of their septic, right?
So on here, we should add,
DCDOH approval, yeah. Yeah.
And you would need to get a building permit as well to add a bathroom, or not?
Yes.
To an already existing structure?
Yes, that's covered under the building permit section because
Okay.
that deals with utilities, right?
Okay.
Yeah, anything that has to be inspected according to uniform code needs a building permit.
Okay, so it's already there.
Yes,
So we'll just add something in here about health department.
Add 10.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what Shane had suggested, I don't have his email here, but what he had suggested is to, I'd have to go back and look at it, to differentiate if it's being added to an existing SDS, then the health department could simply confirm that the SDS can handle the additional, what have you. But if it's not, then it has to be handled the way you said.
Right, yeah, anything that would be added to an existing septic
Right.
is going to require excavation, which will require a permit from a health department.
But even if it's added,
Yes,
okay.
yes, even if they're not changing the size, even if they're not touching the leach field.
Yeah,
They're just
yeah.
running a new pipe to the tank.
Right.
That requires such as.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
all right, so that's covered either way.
Right.
Got it, okay.
So what we're adding, we could maybe add to the 1 and 7 that you have here. Structures may be served by utilities such as gas, electric, and plumbing.
Yes.
And the next sentence that would say, if adding plumbing, you require Dutchess County Health
Yeah,
Department.
we'll put another sentence in there, sure.
Well, I mean, how do we feel about what Catherine said? Do we want to limit this to half bathrooms or make it like full bathrooms?
Well, what Jeff wrote does not
It
discuss.
doesn't limit
It
it.
doesn't differentiate.
But if we're going to limit it, we should say.
Yeah, I think the question is,
We want to limit it.
why are people, like, there is a trend, I think as was acknowledged, that there's a movement toward wanting this for home offices and home gyms and things like that. And I think if it's going to be for a home gym in particular, you're going to want a shower. And so I think limiting it to half bath is going to not fully eliminate the issue.
But you don't need a kitchen.
Right,
Right.
right.
Which makes it not livable space.
Right, and the provisions for cooking is much easier to define than the provisions for sleeping, which is why it's important that it's an and, because you can put a bed in your workout room if you wanted to, right?
Oh, yeah,
So,
for sure.
right, so it's,
But we should specify not kitchens.
right.
It
If
says,
we
Right,
it
yeah,
does,
yeah.
that's why it says
Yeah.
Oh,
and.
did he leave out?
Well, that's what the "and" is. So, structure to contain provisions for living, sleeping, cooking, and sanitation.
What happens in situations of a
shouldn't be
pool house,
So what he's saying is,
where someone may want to have a kitchen and also a showering
Yeah,
area?
you know,
sleeping and sanitation. But you can
I've
have
thought
any one
about
of
that,
those,
and,
is what
and
he's
and
basically saying.
it's true. I mean, you want to have a cookout by the
That's why it's
pool,
an
you want to be able to
and.
wash the dishes and have them in the pool house, and I don't really have an answer for that, I don't know.
Well, it would just require that they go before,
They could get
Variance?
a,
That's what you said.
no, what's the word? Variance, oh my God.
not that it's a no-go, it's, but.
Right, they would need a
and
variance,
This would
yes.
still eliminate, because I've also heard that this question comes up a lot.
Yes.
And this would eliminate the majority of them. It would not eliminate that situation, but I'm kind of okay with that because I think you want to, that's something you want to just keep an eye on. Not that you'd say no, but you
Mm-hmm.
want to know about it.
Yeah, I think there is a route to get it, so.
I mean, the
That's your
planning
variance.
board last year approved a pool house that was quite extensive, and I thought it was a little too much, quite
It's
honestly.
very palatial. Could you, I'm sorry,
I'm not gonna name
I'm just
names.
being,
Right.
maybe I'm just missing this. but
Only addresses.
The sentence about the kitchens, I still
Oh, yeah.
don't follow. How does
I-
that disqualify kitchens? The addition there.
Nothing herein shall be determined to allow for an accessory structure to contain provisions for living, sleeping, cooking, and sanitation.
Oh, okay, all right.
So if you have like one, you can't have the other.
Right,
You
Right.
can't have all the things, otherwise it's a
right.
no-go.
Okay.
So as soon as you put a bathroom in, you can't have a kitchen. Right.
Still seems a little confusing.
Yeah, this was taken from New York State and how they define.
Oh, is that,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
And that, then it's definitely confusing.
Yes.
In that case. Okay.
I did have a couple suggestions in 4. 4 says not more than 3 such accessory structures. We've run into this now as, again, people are doing more and more on their properties, and you've got a 40-acre property, 180-acre property that is only allowed 3 structures. Now, again, they can go and they can get a variance, right? And I don't think we want to open it up to allowing any property to have more than 3. But to try to create a path with some control, I was suggesting these changes. First of all, not more than 3 accessory structures other than permitted signs or agricultural buildings. I would add, or non-dwelling agricultural buildings,
We already have that here, yeah.
right? And then instead of farm, and I would do this throughout the changes, wherever we have the word farm, it should read farm operation, because we eliminated the definition of farm from our definitions and changed it to farm operation.
Okay.
I'm sorry, you want to change it from or agricultural buildings to or
Non-
non-dwelling
right.
agricultural building? Okay, thank
Right.
you.
And then at the end, where it says, in accordance with 250-42, cluster development, residential, then comma, without a special use permit and/or site plan approval as required elsewhere in this chapter. So for example, if you're building an agricultural events venue, and you are presenting a site plan that's going to have more than those 3 accessory structures, presumably that's covered by the site plan, but because it isn't mentioned here, it makes this potentially contradictory. And then the question is, do they need a variance to get that special approval? But it also, maybe more importantly, gives somebody with a larger property the opportunity to have more than 3
But
with
But this
approval.
only covers farm operations. So if you're not a farm operation and you have a large lot, 3 is still your maximum.
No, it's a different sentence. So, sorry, it's beginning of the sentence. The beginning of the sentence is creating an exception for farm operations
Except
already.
where lots are held in common ownership in accordance.
So the number 4 is a list of exceptions.
Right, but if standard residential lots are not an exception, so they're not permitted to have more than 3.
Right.
Yeah, that's
Right.
what okay,
Yeah.
right. They're still, okay, got it.
Yep. So I think the question is, could somebody, if somebody had a standard residential lot and wanted to put a 4th structure on it, the path currently is to get a variance, right, to get an area variance. Do we want to hold that path and go through the variance process, or do we allow for a path that is a site plan approval with the planning board and doesn't require a variance unless the planning board denies it? And maybe we don't. Just want to put it out there because I think it's a growing thing.
The boards have always generally looked pretty positively on
Mm-hmm.
requests for,
Yeah, they don't generally get denied. It would just
The
save one
buildings,
step of
yeah.
the process.
Yeah.
Yeah,
particularly on large lots,
right,
where things are pretty well spread out.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But is it worth taking away that step, or are you more comfortable leaving it as is?
I don't see any harm in leaving it,
Okay.
personally.
Yeah.
And the process is not terribly burdensome.
No, really, it's just time. I mean, everybody's reasonable about it, and it's, you know,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a pretty modest expense, and a little bit of time is all that's really involved.
Yep, I agree.
Are all of his changes on the thing, so when we read that?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, what's next on the hit
What's
list?
yours? May as well round robin with him.
29,
There we go.
accessory dwelling
Yeah, this is the one then. Oh, wait, 29, not
Yeah.
28.
Are we going in numerical order, or we're just?
No, we're not.
Oh, no, this is just what I have. If you want to go in numerical order, I'll
Oh,
wait.
that's fine.
and hold this off.
Go ahead, go.
Okay. The 250-29 accessory dwelling units, I agree with the change that makes it more clear in number 6, B6, getting rid of the habitable space and all that, been out of business. But I'm proposing that instead of sticking with the 35% of what used to be 35% of the total habitable space compared to 1,000 square feet, habitable space eliminates bathrooms, hallways, closets. So that's why 35% was a lower number, I believe. And so
Now it says-
now,
Okay.
Yeah,
continue.
so now we're talking about the total square footage. It seems like that number should go up because now you're including bathrooms, hallways, and closets.
Which is the
It's-
gross floor area that we,
Right,
Yeah.
right. So instead of 35%, make it
Maybe a-
50%. You still have the 1,000 square foot or 50%, whichever is more restrictive. So it isn't actually allowing for necessarily an expansion because you're still limited by the 1,000 square feet.
saying 50% of gross floor area?
Right.
But it's, or 1,000 square feet, whichever is more restrictive. So we still would never let anything go above more than 1,000 square feet.
Then what would be the argument for increasing 35 to
Because
50?
I believe it was as low as 35% because they were referring to habitable space, which
Yeah.
does not include hallways, bathrooms, laundry rooms, closets, things like that. Now, the full gross square footage is going to include all of those
Right,
spaces.
but then the number, the percentage should actually go down rather than up, because you're taking a percentage of a larger area rather than a percentage of a smaller area. So if one
It-
goes up, the other goes down. It's an inverse relationship. In other words, 50% of 10 is 5. 35% of, I don't know, 15 is 5. That's what I'm saying. One goes up, the other goes down. They don't go up together.
Okay.
I think the 1,000 should be increased.
Well, that's what I was going to suggest. If you want to leave the 35%, but maybe increase the 1,000. Because
1,000 is very,
there are a lot of applications from people who want to put in,
It is true, we do see more and more. I mean, 1,000 square feet anymore is.
yeah, and that's where most of the, yeah.
I think we should.
So maybe increase the 1,000 and leave the 35. Because remember, you're having 35% of a larger area.
Right.
So,
Yeah, that's right, because I had it backwards.
right?
Right.
As opposed to 35% of a smaller area. But
Right.
maybe increase the 1,000 square feet.
To
1,500?
25,000?
You do 25,000, yeah. 1,500? I don't know. You think 1,500 is a reasonable number?
Well, the
I mean, if-
problem is that this is supposed to be an accessory dwelling unit. I mean, now you're getting into really having a two-family. And
But you see, that's where, that's the ZBA was scratching their heads about, because they said nowadays, the houses that are being built are bigger.
That's
So
true.
1,000 is very small.
And it's still relative to, because the line's more restrictive, if we hold it at 35%,
Right.
say, and somebody's got a 4,000 square foot home, they're not going to get a 1,000 square foot accessory dwelling unit, right? So if they have a 2,000 square foot home, they're not going to get the 1,000, it's going to be limited to,
And the variance that
350.
we've been
700.
getting
Yeah.
recently are
700, right.
sometimes they're double.
Right.
Yeah, and the thing is, if people are coming in with applications for accessory dwelling units that are considerably larger than 1,000 square feet, or 35%, and they're getting these things routinely, then,
Why aren't we increasing?
yeah, exactly. So, I mean, that would reduce the workload a little bit, because that means that anybody who had up to a 1,500, assuming they have a large enough house, would not have to come in for that.
to me, 1,500 is like another house.
yeah.
It is, but that's what people are building these days, and and Elliot's
Then go
point
for a two-family.
is it's being, well, but it's not,
But if it's detached, most of these things are detached. They're not joined.
Yeah, the law currently applies to either, whether it's attached or not, so.
I mean, 1,000 square feet is pretty small nowadays,
Very small.
yeah.
Again,
the-
it's only
the-
supposed to be for an accessory.
Well,
unit.
Yeah,
It's
and-
not supposed to
and
be
the minimum-
Another house on the property.
Right, the minimum square footage is 400,
Yeah.
right? So
Right.
between 400 and 1,500, that's a big range, right?
Well, you could keep it at 1,000 and people just have to come in and ask for variances. But unless there's some pressing reason not to, the ZBA will give them the variance. At least that's been the pattern, right?
And we've been granting bigger variance.
And some of them are even bigger than 1,500, some of the,
You know, you could take the same argument as to like speed limits. When you know, you ask to increase the speed limit and they say, yeah, well, we already know that if it's 40 miles an hour, someone's going to do 45. Of
course, yeah.
If it's 55, they're going to do
Right.
60 or 65. And so they're coming in for these variances knowing that they could push it. If we increase it to 1,500, who's to say they're not going to increase it or push it even more?
oh,
well, that's possible, sure.
that's a good point.
All right, how about 1,200?
except remember what Catherine said about how you can't legislate something that might happen. Isn't
No,
that what
I'm
you-
just saying that it is
Isn't that
happening.
what you said, Catherine?
It is happening.
That's the general.
Well, people are always
logistic,
going to do
yes.
that anyhow, sure.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, they're all, they
Exactly.
can always come in for a variance.
Yeah, exactly. So leave it be.
I mean, if you want to go to 1,200, 1,200, 1,250, okay, but, I'm just saying that, yeah, at some point in time, you got to say, this is supposed to be an accessory structure.
Understood.
And that's why you gotta still put the 35%.
Right now, the cutoff is about 3,000 square feet. So if you have a 3,000, right, 35% is about
About.
1,000. So that's your.
A little over 1,000.
That's your threshold right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's your threshold right now.
A
Just leave it at-
3,000 square foot house is pretty big too, I imagine.
Right.
It's a
Yeah,
decent
that's true.
size.
Right. But then you'd be limited to 700 in that case. Right, which is pretty small. If you had a 2,000, right, a 700 square foot accessory dwelling unit, which is like one room, basically, and maybe a little kitchen and a bathroom, and that's it, period. But it doesn't matter. I mean, leave it at 1,000. The law's worked well over the years. It does mean a little bit extra work for the boards because people will be coming in to request variances. And, I mean, there may be times when they don't get them, depending on the circumstances, but I don't know of any that have been turned down.
Well, the only thing is every time they grant a variance, there's, one of the factors of the variance is whether the variance is significant. So they always put in there, it's significant, but
Yeah,
it's
so-
necessary,
Right, yeah.
And, the other thing that, and we're seeing some of the side effects of the Airbnb law is that, now they have this accessory structure, they blow it up to, a 3-bedroom apartment versus just, at 1,000 square feet, you got tight 2-bedroom, if not just a 1-bedroom. So now we have that multiplied on top of it.
You still have to qualify with the Board of Health.
I understand that, but we're adding to the misery.
It does, number 5 is the number of bedrooms in the unit shall not be more than 2. So they would need a variance for that as well if they're going to go for more than 2. So it's 2 variances for one project. So,
Probably we want to limit that to 2.
yeah. And I'm fine with keeping the overall numbers the same too. I was just doing my math wrong and suggesting that if the habitable space went up, it would balance that difference. But that isn't, as Ally pointed out, I was doing my math
No, right.
backwards, so.
So then we would ignore those suggestions. Now, you also have number 2 crossed out.
Right, so
But we had
it's-
already done that.
In C2,
C2, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I thought we already crossed that out.
what I found in the file wasn't crossed out.
Yeah, I think we did.
So,
As far as, what is,
C2, no accessory dwelling unit within a principal structure shall be allowed in buildings issued a certificate of occupancy after the effective date of this chapter, except buildings covered by 250-92E.
and that is an
Doesn't say that
exception
now.
for things that don't need a
It
permit.
doesn't say that now?
The revised C2 is no addition.
Yeah,
No
okay.
addition to create an accessory dwelling unit.
Yeah.
Within a principal structure shall be permitted unless such additional conforms to all area and bulk regulations.
Yeah, that was the original C3, so now the 2 has been cut. So I
Okay.
think we've.
Okay, so the one I was looking at online was.
Yeah.
Okay, great,
So 250-29, we have no changes then in.
Okay?
right.
Okay.
Right, so this then allows for a internal apartment within a structure, within a principal dwelling. That's the goal.
Yeah, I mean, as long as it's within, it's not an accessory.
Well, if it's within, it's still an accessory dwelling unit, because it has to meet those.
Accessory dwelling unit,
Yeah.
but not accessory structure.
Yes, right. Great.
While we are so close, you want to do the 250-28 we've been talking about?
Yeah.
Trying to find exactly. 250-28B? Is that the one?
Yeah, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, there's, section,
It basically is one sentence that says smoke or particulate matter. Any emission of smoke or particulate matter from any source shall comply with all local, state, and federal regulations. On the advice of our town attorney and the suggestion of people on the zoning board of appeals, we would just cut that completely. We do not have to say that people have to abide by state and federal regulations, because they have to anyway, whether we tell them to or not.
So
And-
B's coming out totally.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Anything else in 28?
The other one, yeah, hang on a second before you go. We had talked about E and J also. I don't know if we want to leave those be. E is the one having to do with toxic or noxious matter. And J has to do with odors.
Yeah, the J one is hard because it seems very subjective of what an offensive odor is and at the property line.
Are odor and smell like noise and sound?
Yeah.
Well, what happens in a situation if your neighbor's burning something? Well, I use the example of tires. Okay. That's pretty noxious smell. What do you do with that? What do you tell the person? What do you do to the neighbor?
Well, that's
who has the
toxic
smell?
or noxious matter. I think it would fall under that. And that's why I think toxic and noxious matter are different from odor. You know, some people find the smell of skunk okay, you know, others don't. It's
Well, but
an offensive odor is,
But the problem is
That's
with
like
the,
growing hemp.
yeah.
You ever drove?
problem is
drove
with E
past a
though
hemp
is that
farm?
it says something about enclosed. So if you're burning tires outside, you're not covered by E.
Right, that,
Right.
I was just gonna say, J talks about a property
Exactly.
line, but E
Yeah.
says outside the building in
Outs-
which the use is
right.
conducted, which I
Oh,
think
yeah.
is
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, I mean, that's very limiting outside the building there, so. And there needs to be an avenue for somebody who's feeling aggrieved, rightly or wrongly. Somewhere you go to complain about my neighbor burning tires or whatever he's doing. Where would you go? If this clause, say the odor clause is removed,
I mean, I'm fine with leaving the odor
where do
clause.
you
I
go?
mean,
Right now, you call the zoning officer.
have you gotten complaints about odor at this point?
I have not yet.
Right, I was gonna quote you.
The problem is the vagueness of an offensive
agree.
odor.
Right.
I agree.
Yeah, that is,
Offensive to you is, and like you were saying, skunk and this and the
Yeah.
other
I think
thing.
it is very difficult to enforce. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's like a randomly barking dog.
that's right.
It's difficult to enforce that.
Or the stray guinea pigs.
Exactly.
Well,
I thought he said stray kids.
Guinea pigs, but the latter also.
Please, let's not regulate stray kids. I got plenty of problems.
I think we need to acknowledge that this,
And sometimes stray kids have some offensive odors themselves.
Exactly.
wow, we're really going to.
We are, sorry.
Yeah, okay, moving right along. I think we have to acknowledge that it could be an issue. We need to say something about it. We can't just say nothing.
Well, toxic
And leave it in
is
there and
something
it-
that we would certainly want to,
If it's
Yeah.
vague and it comes to
Protect,
the CEO says, well, I don't think that's
Odor.
offensive, then the issue's
Yeah,
closed.
I'm okay with E.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Maybe
fine
it's
with it
not
too.
great,
No,
but it's
What about
okay.
J?
But,
J is too subjective.
yeah, I understand your point, that someone, a neighbor needs to have the avenue to say, this isn't right, it's impacting my life, but like, who's to say?
Let's say someone has a flower
The
garden
zoning officer.
Mm-hmm.
and the neighbor next door is allergic.
Yeah, odors are tough.
Or someone decides,
Considered a farm or agricultural.
But it wouldn't emissions.
The way it is now, somebody comes to you, says, this guy is doing whatever, and I find it offensive. Okay. What do you, what do you do?
Honestly, I they they have a home compost, they're not any kind of a farm operation, they're just doing it for their own garden that they consume in their own home, there's no commerce that's happening, and somebody doesn't like the smell of compost, I like the smell of compost. I'm not going to be offended by it. If I'm asked by a resident to inspect an offensive odor, and I go out there and I don't find it offensive, it's entirely subjective. And then so I say to them, this isn't offensive, and therefore it's not a violation.
Right.
And then they go to the ZBA to
Right.
say, we find that this is offensive.
Right.
And the ZBA says, well, we don't find it offensive.
Right.
And then it turns into an Article 78. It just, it's the
Yeah, I mean-
subjectiveness makes me,
So we leave it, that's what happens, basically.
potentially,
Yeah,
yeah. Again,
potentially.
we've never had it, but.
Right,
Yeah.
but yeah, that would be,
The kind of thing where neighbors just need to learn how to talk to each other, and it's
Right.
not necessarily
well, I
always
mean,
a
we have
zoning
had
issue.
people complaining about, the smell of wood smoke they don't like, so.
Mhm.
I mean, these things do come up from time to time.
Right.
So what did Shane's have to say about any of these other two items?
It was not, smoke is the one that bothered him.
Mhm.
E and J, he doesn't, he said you could leave them in, you could take them out. Doesn't, to him, it didn't make a big difference.
I'm just concerned with J. I would be
I think
okay with
it's-
taking J out.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's just as, it hasn't become a minefield, but it has just as much of
Yeah, and wood smoke is another good example. I love the smell of smoke.
But
If somebody calls me to come out, I'll be like, wow, that's delicious.
When I had the wood stove, I'd like the smell, but my wife couldn't stand it.
Yeah, including in the section of farms.
So
Okay.
Ellen, are you okay with taking it out? Because you're the,
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, I'd be happier if it was somehow more clearly defined, if we left it in, but somehow came up with a better set of parameters than offensive, because obviously, as you said, that's,
And I think that's the trouble with the odor and smell.
Subjective.
So,
Yeah.
so similarly in,
I don't know how you would do that.
yeah, in A
With
is,
everybody having COVID, half the people can't smell
they
anyway.
can't smell anyway, right? No, you can't. So that's why I'm going back to A.
But
right?
that's also
You
pretty-
can't measure noise. You can measure sound.
Okay,
Noise.
you know
noi-
what I mean.
Right, no, but
I know.
it's important.
Yes.
Because A is labeled noise, but then A1 refers to sound levels, right?
So what should it be? It should be
A
sound.
should be sound.
It should be
Because you
sound.
can measure sound. You can't measure noise.
Okay,
Noise-
so we can change A to
is
sound, that's fine.
So
Right.
A should be sound.
Right, and anywhere that noise appears should turn to
No,
sound.
Yeah, like in 5, it says noise, that should be,
And you can probably,
wouldn't an offensive odor be covered under E as noxious? Like if it's
Oh.
really bad.
yeah,
and
no,
Yeah,
So maybe E still gives any neighbors specific
It
or
has-
strident
yeah.
or.
it has more substance to it.
They would be, they could,
but if you're going to do that, then I think if you're going to keep E, you might want to eliminate the clause at the end about the building. Because it's also going to refer to, it's going to be a more general thing.
Yeah, but if it's
No.
enclosed within the building, then it doesn't affect the neighbor.
right. You,
It affects if it goes outside the building.
Right.
So we'll cut J then.
where the noise should be changed to sound.
Yeah, just show up
Okay.
several times.
Yeah, I already marked like
Okay.
4 or 5.
And then get rid of J.
That's solving all the world's problems tonight.
Okay. Rather than working backwards, let's move forward.
Anyone else have one? What's the next on your list, Jeff?
The next on mine is 51 farming.
Who's that?
51,
51
farming?
farming.
This one was all new,
And
wasn't it?
this one is pretty simple. Basically, it's just, instead of using the word farm or the word agricultural uses, it should always be farm operations. Because again, that's what we define in the law as farm operation. We don't define agricultural use, and we don't
So
define
we want to
farm.
change it from farming, agricultural protection, and right to farm? We're going to change it.
We could leave the title in there, because that's just the title of the section. And we are protecting agriculture, and New York State has a right to farm state. I don't think it's necessary, but I think if it's farm operations.
So you're saying, like,
It's
in the
enough.
first sentence, the town of Clinton supports the use of land for farm operations.
Well, no, because that's a different thing, agricultural purposes, right? And then it goes on
Right,
to
I was
define
thinking
that, right? So then it's okay.
Well, you could still say
So-
for farming, can't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can still use the words, but whenever you're referring
To
to
a
the
farm.
use, capital U use, it should
Okay.
say farm operations, right? So I marked that up, and I'll give that to you.
How many
Oh,
marks
good.
are there?
And then in E, F, G, and H,
Big E, F, G, and H?
Yes.
Okay.
all of those refer to setbacks and standards for development, which don't actually apply to farming. They apply to things that affect farming. And so I think that those sections should appear in 20615 subdivision of land, 25096 site plans, and 25097 special permits, because that's where they apply.
And they're not already addressed, these issues aren't already addressed in
Not
those
specific to
sections?
farming. I'd have to go back and review to see what that is. These were written as protections for farming, which is great. But if they're in this section, the planning board isn't going to look at farming for a subdivision that happens to be next to a farm necessarily, right? And I think it'll be too easily missed.
Well, you have to circulate it to the farmers all the time.
You can do
Right.
both. You can list them both places.
Yes,
That's
you
what I
could,
was
sure,
gonna say, can we
yes,
can we
sure.
just duplicate it?
Yeah,
Sure.
duplicated, sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, but do we need to?
You could also refer, right? So if we keep it in this section,
Yeah.
and then we just add to subdivision, site plans, and special permits,
Right.
Permits.
So where should it, so it should stay here and be referenced, or the other way around?
yeah, I think it's fine, stay here and be referenced.
Okay.
Yeah,
Less reworking. so.
right. 206-15, of course, is outside of this revision process, so that'd
Yeah,
have
we're
to be
not
another thing,
touching
so,
any of the 206.
yeah. So, okay, that was it. I have no farming. Oh, sorry, there was one other little thing in C. Third line, the town of Clinton at any and all times, and I would add the word and at all such locations. It's just more clear.
Where is it?
C, the
C.
third line.
We cut all that out.
250,
Cut it all
51.
out.
So after,
Undertake agricultural practices?
it says, within the town of Clinton, period. We do have something about adding in compliance with all applicable laws and regulations.
Where are we looking? I'm sorry.
C, so the right to undertake agricultural
C.
practices,
Okay,
farmers,
right,
as well as
right.
those employed, retained, or otherwise authorized to act on
Right.
behalf of farmers,
Town of Clinton,
may lawfully engage in farming practices within the town of Clinton.
Or farm operations?
period. Or farm operations, yeah.
Okay, so there's a period there.
Yeah,
Okay.
And the, right.
Thanks. And then the rest of C is gone. Great. Pretty well. Okay, thanks.
is he hitting all the ones that were on your list? I know you guys were sharing and can,
Yeah, mine, I think, are all spoken for.
Okay.
I only had a couple things. So these are all his.
I know you had one, Catherine.
I
Why
had
don't-
two things
Why
I
don't we
wanted to
round
talk
robin
about.
for a minute?
One was animal husbandry,
Mhm.
which we had talked about, and I thought
Briefly,
you were
right.
going to you were working on a,
Yeah, I don't have something yet, but
my only concern is hogs stuck out to me because I feel like now you need more acreage for hogs than for horses, although I'm not sure that that is accurate.
It's 250, 32.
32, it is C1, 2 acres for 1 hog, and then additional 1 acre for each additional hog, up to a maximum acreage requirement of 50 acres. And I know we took down the number for the
Yeah,
acreage
for
for
horses, we
horses
changed
pretty.
it. Yeah,
So that horse is a minimum of 1 acre for the first horse,
Right.
and then additional half acre.
Right.
I just feel like that's crazy. A hog is, and I recognize that the smell may be why this is like
Yeah,
that,
that's,
but it's a much smaller animal.
Mm-hmm.
And, I don't know, what do you all think?
well, I mean, I think it's the smell. I also think it's the noise. I think hogs make much more noise than horses. I mean, I don't have one, so I'm making generalizations based
Yeah, I
on
gotta
experience.
say, my family raises like 3 a year. I
Yeah.
never think of the noise.
Yeah, no, I mean, only when
I
you're,
don't
you know,
never
like
notice
when
it.
the vet's there, they're
Yeah,
loud.
yeah.
Other than
Um,
that, they're pretty quiet. But it's, I think it's the manure, but I don't know. It just seemed odd to me
it
that,
may have, I mean, the idea may have been at the time to do them the same. That's why the numbers are the same with horses and,
right, so, okay, so
But
then
we-
maybe we just need to
but
have
maybe- yeah.
hogs agree with horses.
well, yeah, I have a feeling that may have been the idea back when it was written.
So
So-
C is pigs, poultry, and small animals.
Right, but 1 only speaks about hogs, and then 2 is about poultry.
So poultry seems a little, an additional acre for 25,
Right, and that's a lot too.
that's a lot too.
I mean, when you think of it now, like, you can have chickens in Brooklyn, right?
mhm.
You know, it's a little, so, this is my concern, you know, we want to encourage agriculture, we want to have people to be able to have their backyard chickens, and not, of course, you know, bother their neighbors, but,
So in conforming with horses, we said half acre for each additional, we
Yeah.
said?
1 acre for
One-
the
1
first
acre
and
for the first.
half for each additional.
And then half for each additional.
So for hogs, if we changed it to 1.5 as well,
All right,
I'd be fine with that.
and then,
So, staying with hogs for a second, so, minimum of 1 acre.
Finished.
Which originally would have been
So then it should say 50 acres worth of hogs.
Or something like
49
that.
hogs.
50
yeah.
acres worth of hogs or whatever, yeah.
Now,
Or just put a number.
why can't we put the number?
Exactly, put a
Let's just put the
number.
number of hogs that would be, equate to 50 acres.
So 48
up to
times
a
2 is,
maximum.
48 times 2 is 96. So you could have 97
And I
hogs.
think we'd have a problem with ag markets limiting the number of hogs someone's going to have.
Yeah.
Because that's
But
going
how-
to cut into farming.
Right.
But,
That might be true.
I mean, limiting the acre is the same, isn't it? I mean, the result is.
Well, we're not. We're saying that
Well, depending on how.
once you hit 50 acres, you can have as many as you want.
Well, but maybe it's not, but remember, there's the other reading of it, which is that that's the most you can have, and then you're done. That's how I
It just
read it.
says each additional 25 such poultry up to the maximum acreages of 50 acres.
So I
Actually,
think,
that's, you have a good point. It's in multiple spots, the
Yeah.
same wording.
I don't think that was the intent, though.
No, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I
just don't think
think,
that we can limit, especially because it being a farm.
I agree. So I think that if we just went an additional half acre shall be provided for each additional hog, period. And then
Let it go.
you're allowed to have as many as the
Your
acres that you
property.
own.
That's
Right.
right,
So we just take out up to a maximum.
Yeah,
Out of both 1 and 2?
yeah.
yeah. Now, do we need to, do we want to address the acreage for the poultry, or?
For the poultry. 2 acres for the
acres.
first 25. An additional acre for each additional 25.
So if it's inside, then none of it applies. Okay, so that's fine.
So the horse is 1 acre for the first 2, 1 horse for the first 2 acres?
No,
No, we changed it.
changed it.
To what?
1 for the first.
1 acre shall be provided for the first horse kept. 1/2 additional acre shall be provided for each additional horse on the lot.
With no maximum.
Did you fix the one from Ross regarding 250-66?
This is his
Yeah.
word. That's what he,
With
That's
no,
what he
and there's no maximum, I don't think.
right.
We didn't set a maximum.
So, I mean, we're talking about 25 chickens here. I don't think we want to lower.
Yeah.
I,
I think,
so.
well, you don't think we want to lower the acreage from 2 to 1 for the first 25?
Yeah. Do we want to have 1 acre with 25 chickens?
Seems a little crowded.
It depends. I mean, okay, so I'm gonna be the fly in the ointment here,
Yeah.
gentlemen. I apologize.
No, no.
But so, meat birds, we can raise 15 meat birds in a space between these 2 walls,
Yep.
and they're fine.
Well, and I think the other, to add to that, it says, for poultry operations contained completely within buildings, the acreage requirements contained in the subsection shall not apply. So what that's going to do is encourage people to cram their birds into a building and have as many birds as they want, as opposed to allowing those birds to free range on an acre, right? Which seems like something we would rather encourage. So if we lower that number, we're incentivizing trapping those poor chickens in a building,
If we lower which number?
the 25.
Yeah, we're talking about lowering the 2 acre
Yeah.
requirement to 1.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and what about the barn for the horse? You're gonna need a place for the horse, so.
It's a different section. We're not there.
We're not in that
We're not talking
section.
about it. We were referencing it but only as for informational purposes. So what about if we did a minimum of 1 acre shall be provided for each 25 adult or fully grown chickens, ducks, geese, or other fowl,
We're not going to talk about baby chickens.
and an additional 1 acre shall be provided for each additional 25 such poultry.
I'd be fine with
So
that.
it's a little, gives a little more leeway, or makes it a little easier, but it doesn't go crazy. Is that good?
And if they want 30 chickens, they can put them in a barn.
Free range in groups
Okay.
of 10.
And those gonna be next door neighbor.
And then can we change "or" after ducks, geese, or other fowl to "and/or"? So it's a total of 25 birds?
Fully grown
Oh,
chickens,
okay,
ducks,
yes.
geese,
And/or
or,
other fowl or birds.
They go
Yeah.
back about the neighbor's chicken going into the neighbor's.
well, that's a neighbor dispute,
Then
not
they
a
get to
zoning
eat it.
dispute.
The only other,
That's where good fences make good neighbors.
the only other thing I wanted to talk about was animal processing. And I know it's not allowed anywhere in town.
I was going to say, we don't have a section on that, right?
It's just disallowed. But I would like to suggest that we allow it. Obviously with a special permit, or you want to put acreage requirements on it. I don't think it's going to happen, but there is a shortage of processors, and I think it would be good to encourage, or at least not say absolutely not here. Maybe a more hot button issue than I.
Yeah, but where is it in the
It's really only.
schedule of use?
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I'd need to be more educated on, like,
Yeah, if
what
I
animal,
remember-
what is the definition of animal processing?
Yeah.
Exactly.
If I remember,
Well, the
The butchering part.
Well, slaughterhouse is it's not a word that's used anymore, but that's what's in the schedule of use, is slaughterhouse.
Okay,
But we took it out.
because like
But
if somebody's slaughtering their own turkey on Christmas morning,
Right, and there is at least
barn.
one place in town that has a cutting room. As presumably for their own use, I don't really know. But,
I mean, somebody goes hunting and they slaughter their own deer.
Here.
I mean,
right.
but
But
that
this is
wouldn't
a
be.
commercial, but
right.
this would be a commercial.
okay, so we're
Yeah.
talking commercial.
Commercial processing,
So
Okay.
page 8 is slaughterhouse.
Yes,
All right.
prohibited everywhere.
yes, exactly.
I
So
wanted to
I'm,
just make sure we weren't going to stop people from doing their own animal.
no, I'm sorry, I should have been more specific. I mean a
that's fine.
commercial, or
Commercial
a
thing.
commercial
Okay.
operation.
So
In which case,
where are we going to allow it? Industrial?
well, that would be easy. I think,
So can I make a suggestion, and you can shoot me down if you want? Since we have no code written on it, would you be willing to tackle writing a section that we can pass as a separate law? That's sort of like what we did with short-term rentals. It was in
Right.
here and it sucked, and so we just said, we'll write it separately and do it separately,
oh, okay, aside from apart from the zoning.
from zoning revision.
I would, but what do you, is that, Jeff,
Mm-hmm.
is that something that's covered at all under ag and markets?
That's what I'm looking up now.
Because of-
I remember that that processing is listed in there. What I can't remember is it listed as a farm operation or is it listed as a separate thing? So we want, because if it's listed as a farm operation, then it's protected
Okay,
and
so
it
then it
falls
may
under our
not need to
farming.
be addressed. So if you would do that
Right.
research and
Yeah.
let me know, and then if it is not protected, then I
Yeah.
will,
There was a big issue with Quattros,
Yeah.
why?
where they weren't allowed to wholesale their,
It doesn't matter.
because they didn't meet the USDA approval.
Right.
Right, right.
And
Yeah,
now it's
so we would want
use.
to add, whether we add it to the section on farming or we add it to a new section,
It will
that it
be-
has to meet the ag and markets USDA requirements, right? Just like a dairy.
Oh, no,
dairy
it
farm.
was just for wholesaling. They couldn't wholesale
Right.
without the USDA. If they,
Right.
like if you sell
I don't,
to you a half a cow or a full cow, I'm fine. But if I sell it to the store to sell it, then I have to have the
I
USDA.
think USDA would be business owner's choice.
Okay.
It's something that is valuable to them because then
They can market
people
it.
they can slaughter for people that are reselling, but it's not necessary
Well,
to
there
our
was that
people
one
that don't
that you
have
guys
it.
were using that were so backlogged because they had the USDA and then they gave up the USDA.
Well, there's a story, that's not why, but yes.
Whatever.
He let his USDA
Is
certification
this the one in
go.
Milan?
Yes.
Okay.
In Redhook, because he didn't want to deal with them. And he-
Well, yeah, I was
you
gonna
know.
say, because I had some dealings with him as well, and like, they were inspectors there every day from USDA, and it gets, it's intense.
So if you would just find out if
Quattros
it's covered
doesn't do
under ag,
slaughtering.
and then if
Yeah.
not,
They
They
just sell.
fired
All
their
right.
birds and everything else.
I
Sure,
thought they
they had
just sell.
turkeys for
they-
Thanksgiving. That's where the issue came up.
Oh, okay, I thought it was
That
just
they
on
had
the
over
selling.
250
Right.
turkeys that they couldn't sell now because they
Oh,
couldn't
okay.
wholesale it.
All right, I got it, I got it.
okay, so good, I like that solution, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're
So
gonna write-
I did just find it.
And?
Yeah, it says, under the definition for land use and agricultural production, land use and agricultural production shall not include land or portions thereof used for processing or retail merchandising of such crops, livestock, or livestock products.
So it's not protected by ag and market?
Protected by ag.
Not under this section. They may have another section that's a different thing, right? So part of this section is also what determines what your assessment is and whether you get an agricultural assessment. And so this may be limiting which portions of the property qualify for that assessment reduction, right? So it needs further exploration, but
All right, well,
Yeah.
let me know, and I will, aside from, not included in the zoning revision, I will
Yeah.
craft some wording about a
So
way to allow them at certain.
do we want to at least note it on here as to what district it would be allowed?
Well, I think when we pass the law, we would do that, right?
I mean, we can list it on here as to where it would be allowed.
Yeah, yeah.
By special permit.
Do you want to decide that now?
I'm trying to see if,
well, if it's a protected farming practice, then we'd have to be allowed everywhere.
All right, so we have to wait, and I guess.
Yeah.
Those are the only two things that I had.
What is, I mean by accessory?
You have to come up to the mic.
Oh, that was eliminated. That's not on there anymore. That's eliminated. The 250-29.1,
Is that
yeah.
included?
that was replaced by the short-term rental law.
Oh, so this is all, okay.
Right.
I'll also look up and I'll do a search for E-code to see if other towns have anything related to this.
That would be awesome.
Well, I'm sure
Somebody must.
Pleasant Valley, because of Quattros.
Yeah, so we'll,
Right, Red Hook
See if we can-
presumably.
There's a fellow in Pine Plains who
Maybe.
does this stuff, right?
Yep,
Yeah, so
Yeah.
they would probably have
Yeah.
something too.
Mylars.
Yeah.
All right, moving forward.
What else you got?
MCEI, What do you got?
I know that I'm in the process of looking at the camp ones, the camp or campground and the camping trailer. In particular, as we move into short-term rentals, and how does that apply? Because we have at least one campground that is wanting to do short-term rentals. And one of the biggest differences is that campgrounds are a seasonal permit, and short-term rentals can happen anytime. So I just want to look and see if we need to add some wording to that. So if we're meeting again, I'd rather go over that then.
Is that, what, 69-1?
37 and 38.
All right, but you're running out of daylight. Just-
I know, I know.
Okay.
Yeah, your runway's getting
Right.
small.
Oh,
Restaurants and
So,
farm.
so 38 was completely cut, as far as I know.
What?
Okay, it's still on the
We
folder,
have an A and a
but-
B, but
Oh, right.
it only has A1
I
versus
thought-
A1 and 2.
My notes are wrong.
Oh, did we totally cut it?
My notes could be wrong.
Well, it's a lot to,
No, don't listen to me.
Because I have this revised 4/18/2019.
Yeah, so you're going to be more right than I am. So now that you brought it up, when it comes to short-term rentals, we're gonna also
Revamp that.
deal with those changes separately from zoning revision likely.
Right. Right. And it may be that the easy answer is that a campground that wants to do short-term rentals, once they apply for a short-term rental special permit, then they can do both.
Yeah.
So the problem is, and when we talked about short-term rentals, is that we were only supposed to be allowing for one per property. Now you're talking about a campground
Well-
trying to do it, that would be,
We had written it so we would allow one permit per person, but we didn't limit to one like accessory
Well,
dwelling.
we
per
didn't
property.
limit the hosted.
The host.
We only limited the non-hosted.
The
Hosted does
non-hosted.
not have a limitation on it.
So,
And-
like-
And hosted can mean adjacent property.
so
Yeah.
a
So
that's something
campground
to look
would
at.
be hosted, you would think, it would, you would.
It depends on the situation. Like, the previous owners to Interlake, for example, lived on site, right? So
Right.
that would be hosted. I don't think the current
yeah,
owners
but
live
living
on
on
site.
site is not living in the same building.
Under
it's
hosted,
still
they don't have to.
Hosted is defined as living on the same parcel.
Or adjacent parcel.
Yeah.
It doesn't even have to be the same parcel for hosted.
It has to be
just
one that's
adjacent.
abutting it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
currently, right.
But isn't it a question of whether the campground is the primary use and the short-term rental could be an accessory use? Like, for instance, RV Interlake.
Yeah, so I think when we rewrite this, that's what we will
Address
have to
it.
deal with that and
Right.
address it.
Yeah, well, short-term rentals has to, by definition, be an accessory use, right? Because you have to
Yeah.
reside,
Yeah.
right? That's your principle. A campground is not, I don't know if that has to be accessory or not. I think that's under commercial uses, right?
Well, the
So,
non-hosted is not reside, it doesn't reside, the non-hosted. Well, then-
I don't remember how that's worded, but,
Okay, so we just need to keep that in mind as we
Right.
go over the short-term rentals again.
Right.
The campgrounds is something
Yeah,
to be
camp-
addressed.
right,
All right.
And addressing
yeah.
someone with a property with a bunch of cottages on it.
So-
They get one permit for 6 cottages, I don't know about that.
The next one that I have is 25092 certificates of occupancy.
92?
Yeah.
You're going in numerical order, right? So we're
Yeah.
closer to the end of
I
your...
only have one after that, so.
All right, great.
Sorry.
All right, no, that's good.
All right, so COs,
I can make some up quick if you.
Nope.
Let me jump in with,
Yeah.
for 71, before you get, since we're trying to go in order
Yeah.
here. I have,
organized.
I don't know what this means, maybe somebody can remember back that far. Section B,
General provision?
yeah, I have, for some reason, I put a circle around it, and I don't know why. The wording is the same. I'm looking at the most current version, which is from August, and compared to, and the wording is the same. So, does anybody remember? If not, we'll just move on.
Yeah, nothing was changed there.
Nothing was
Because you can
changed,
see-
yeah.
You
Did
can
we
see
talk
where the
about-
comments were.
Did we talk about that for something about that would have, no? Maybe not.
I'm only showing a change in C.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do have a faint recollection of a discussion about the words any site alteration, but I think we decided that it was resolved because it says that requires an approved plan. So, because the question was, can you dig in your backyard? Right? But that would not require an approved plan. So I
Yeah,
think there
I-
was a discussion, but I think it was
I
self-resolved.
had a note on A and B saying, add a reference to see below. So
Okay.
like
All right, so we're done. Okay.
91? Is that what you said? 92?
91 we did.
92?
92.
That's where we started, right? So 92, similar to 91, 250-92 has an alternate section. I forget the number, 116 maybe, and they're contradictory. And the most significant contradiction, a lot of it is just wording, which is fine. But the most significant comes in what is in this one, section D, or paragraph D, temporary certificates. So I kind of combined the two. And
Okay.
And you're proposing that your changes be put in here, in this
yes,
section?
yeah, because we're dealing with 250, and then after this revision process, we should look at, there's something like 15 sections of other code that also appear in 250, and look at what, if anything, do we have to do with those.
So which one does
250.
this match up with that we might want to consider deleting? 92, that is.
I'm not sure which one that is. I might be, I want to say 116, but in 1 second, let me look.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of sections, as Jeff was just referencing, in our code that are not under Chapter 250, but
It's 112-16.
Or like?
they're very similar to what we have in 250.
Yeah,
What is it?
112-16.
112-16.
That sounds a little
Yeah.
dangerous.
Well, it is, and this is one significant example. So in D, it says temporary certificates. And in D, as it's written in 250, the expiration certificate, a temporary certificate is only for 30 days, and it cannot be renewed. So it cannot exceed 30 days. In 112-6, it's 6 months, and it can be renewed every 6 months, right? So I think 30 days, especially where we find construction now, 30 days is completely unreasonable. And I think that 6 months is much closer to unreasonable. And the building inspector can make it fewer than 6 months, right? It's at his discretion. So the way that it's worded in 112-16 is a temporary certificate of occupancy shall expire 6 months after the date of issuance or at an earlier date if so specified. A temporary certificate of occupancy may, at the discretion of the building inspector and upon payment of an additional fee as specified in 112-5, the building inspector may place special conditions as necessary to ensure safety and to protect the interests of the town.
So you like the 6 months because they can always go less?
That's right.
But it gives the,
And they can also renew it, right?
Don't you
So-
think that 6 months is too much to have somebody living temporary rather than just giving the CO, which is going to be safer, a fire code?
Well, that's why it's at the discretion of the building inspector, and he can make it fewer than 6 months. He could go in and say 30 days if he
I was
wanted.
just thinking maybe there's in the fire code or building code, CO thing about like exactly how many years that we
Yeah, I don't know for what the state says, but the uniform code, we can check that. But leaves it up to the building inspector, and he can put special conditions on it. He can say, you've got to put a piece of plywood over this door so nobody can open it, for example, if you don't have your second floor deck or whatever he deems is appropriate. And it specifically says for safety and to protect the interests of the town. So,
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, we do that all the time with, like, sliding glass doors to a deck that's not there.
Right.
Is that you either have to make the sliding glass door inoperable, or you have to put up a guardrail.
yeah, right.
When someone opens the door, they have a guardrail there, so they can't go in or out. So you want to change 250-92D to,
Yeah, to
That'll
just,
be what I send.
yeah, to eliminate
oh,
about
it's a
halfway
whole
down.
bunch of writing, not just
Yeah.
6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, about halfway down where it says, "and provide the work can be reasonably expected all the way through the second 30 days," would get eliminated and replaced with that sentence.
Okay.
And so the thought being on this, Jeff, for these couple of things where we think there's duplicates in other sections of our town code, we would wait until zoning revision is completely passed
Yes,
and then go and remove those sections.
Right. right.
Oh, okay, so then we'll just take the duplicates out of the iron.
We'll take the duplicates out once we pass the things that
Okay.
merge them.
And I thought there was something else. Okay, yeah, so that's all I had for 92. I did have something else for 91, which is building permits.
Going backwards?
Yeah, just one number.
Okay.
And then I only have one of that.
Okay.
So we didn't really read this, but this is the same thing where in the other section of code, there are contradictions.
Oh, this is A6?
This is 250-91A6, yes.
Yeah, we were talking about this when you walked in.
Yes, right.
So let's finish that, yeah.
So here it says, if it'll be void if construction is not started within a period of 1 year or completed within a period of 3 years. Whereas in the other section of code, which is 112, it says within 1 year, and that it can be renewed essentially indefinitely. So the language of 112, and then I did tweak it slightly, but this would be the new language for 6 that I propose. A building permit issued pursuant to this chapter shall expire 1 year from the date of issuance or upon the issuance of a certificate of occupancy other than a temporary certificate of occupancy. And that part's important because a temporary certificate of occupancy does not it does not cure the building permit, right? Whichever occurs first. The permit may, upon written request, be renewed for successive 1-year periods, provided it is not revoked or suspended at the time the request for renewal is made. The relevant information in the application is up to date. Construction is commensurate with the original building permit issued, and the renewal fee is paid. And then I added one of the additional sentence, which is the building inspector and/or the zoning administrator may perform an inspection to ensure these renewal requirements are met. Because what we have found is that people will just continue to renew building permits to avoid final inspections.
So in this, you're proposing that after a year, they can send in a written request and a check for whatever, and get an additional year.
Provided they meet those conditions.
Right.
So why would they file for indefinite periods of time? I was told, obviously, the financial people thinking that they're not going to be taxed on something that's not finished. I was told that after it was 2 years old or older, that the assessor can tax you on it.
Yeah, I don't know about the assessor side of it, and
Yeah.
that may be something that they have in there.
So there is no financial benefit if the assessor is going to go after 2 years and assess you for it, no matter if it's done or not.
Right, not from that perspective, but if you have somebody who wants to build an accessory structure on their property and they apply for the building permit, and what they really want to do is build an accessory dwelling unit, and they turn that into an accessory dwelling unit, and they keep renewing the permit, and they actually start using the building, and all we have to do, all we do is just say, okay, yes, you can renew it, and we don't actually go out there and inspect it, and we're like, hey, you've been building this building for 5 years, aren't you done yet? Oh, no, we're almost ready. They've done short-term rentals for 2 years in a building that never got a certificate of occupancy. So this triggers at each year the potential for an inspection by the building inspector or the zoning administrator to go out there and say, okay, show me that it still matches the plans, show me where you are in the progress, and then it allows us to be part of that process of making sure those things get finished up.
It also may help avoid a situation like we were hearing last night, where a house was being built for 3 years and sort of torturing the neighbors as the construction process went on for a very long time.
Well, my neighbor was building for over 15 years.
Well, wouldn't you have liked them to have a little pressure
And
put
him
on
and
them?
his son would come over and nail in a couple of nails and lunchtime, let's go.
And the problem too is people doesn't want to close their permit because they feel like the assessor will tax them
Right.
once it's closed.
Right.
Right,
So,
but that's what I'm saying is I believe, and I only know this from past, people telling me things, that after 2 years, doesn't matter if it's closed or not, the assessor can,
It depends on every assessor. Some assessors, they don't go by that. They just tax it.
but that's where the communications between the building and the assessor and the highway and everybody's on the same page so that it triggers something so that everybody's in line with what's the next step.
Right, yeah. So I just made a note to check with Teresa about that.
Okay.
And then we can be in communication if we're going out to do that inspection for renewal and say, hey, look, the house is basically done. Maybe you should go out and take a look.
So
Well,
is
the
the,
assessor get the copy of all the
is the
CO.
renewal process open-ended, or is there a limit to how many times?
The way that 112 is written, it is open-ended.
It is
right?
open-ended.
Yeah, it doesn't have to stay that way. We could say up to a maximum of X times. But then we run into a situation like we had with COVID, where we had completely unexpected delays, and there was no way to predict. And there were the things that would have been delayed for a long time. But we don't want, I agree, I don't think we want the possibility of somebody spending 15 years to build a house,
Well, yeah, I mean, you could have a limit, and then if something like a pandemic comes along,
Well, but I think
you have to adapt.
having it reviewed every time they renew it
Right.
solves that problem.
And it is at the
You can say,
discretion.
nope, we're done.
Right.
Or you can acknowledge that there's something going on in the world and that there's,
Right.
it's
Yeah,
reasonable.
the renewal can be denied, right? So then then a violation would be issued, and the remedy for that violation would be to suggest a timeline of construction, right? And then the applicant would have to submit that timeline of construction, and then the zoning administrator and building inspector could hold them to that.
How about the resources to do the renewals? Is that a problem?
Sure.
I mean, they aren't done now, right? You said basically they're.
No, we do renewals now.
But you don't actually go out.
We don't actually go out,
Yeah, so
right?
this is
And this
gonna be-
wouldn't require that we do. This would allow for us to do it. It says that we may.
Here's a question, is like, let's say someone starts at year 1 and they don't finish until year 5, but in between, let's say the building code's changed.
Yes, they
Let's
do.
say it went from R38 in the roof to now R40.
Yeah.
Are they now required to bring it up to the R40, which is the
Yeah,
current, to
it's
get the
one of-
CO?
Yeah, one of the conditions of renewal is that the information in the application is up to date. So then they would have to renew that part of the application and make it up to date,
What has to be up to date? Up to date to the update code?
the updated code. Yeah, that's how I would interpret that. So,
That means they would need to redo it.
Oh, and
They
that
did.
puts a fire under them to,
right, yeah, if
Finish.
if the installation is done and it's in, and what they aren't done with is the railings on their deck, we're not gonna make them change the insulation. But if they haven't done the roof yet, and the installation code is changed to bring that up to
Or if they
date, we
haven't
may
done it
have to
yet.
redo it.
So if it's
Not
done, then
completed
it's,
yet, then
Right,
we're
That's,
okay.
that's
Then
how I
we're
would read
clear.
that, yeah. So, and the language can be
Still-
different if we want it to be more
Yeah,
clear.
that's still vague too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So we can certainly make it more clear, This is just, that part was verbatim from 112, so.
Someone says R19 in the walls, and then all of a sudden it's R21.
Right.
And the sheet rock's already up.
Yeah, and I think there like, I'd be curious what the uniform code enforcement says about that, right? Is,
Yeah, but what
it-
about the plans? They already submitted a plan, all of a sudden, they're changing, all of a sudden.
Right, you got a building permit based on the plan.
You're gonna have to update the plan then. It's
well, it would be
not-
similar to if the house were complete, we aren't going to make somebody change their insulation because the code changed. So if that section of the house is complete, I would say that the same applies.
I mean, that also goes with roof rasters and everything else, because you may not have the depth to get it up to that R40 or whatever.
Right.
So now you have to go with bigger roof rafters, which may already be there too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
then the only other option is to go with a spray foam versus maybe, blown in or whatever.
I think if it would lean toward the non-conforming issues, right? That when a law changes, everything isn't brought up to that law
I
if it's already done.
Just think we have to be clear on those
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, so we can try to clarify that.
Because I know there was a lot of energy code changes in the last couple of
Yeah,
years.
like there's a certain neighborhood that submit an energy code.
Right.
Or blowing gas, all kinds of stuff.
Yep.
So then, also in 25091,
Keep going backwards.
no, we're still there, we didn't leave it. In B1, it says applications for a building permit shall be made to the building inspector on forms provided by him. I would suggest we change that to by the building department. And then eliminate with the appropriate fee, because that appears later. and shall contain the following, and eliminate the word information. And you'll see why in a second. Again, this is combining 112 and 250-91.
Oh, this is 91, we're in 91 still?
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
So these are all in the things that you sent us to?
yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So in number 6, it requires 3 copies of plans. And I asked Mike, we never see 3 copies of plans. 2 copies of plans is usually what we see. Mike agrees he doesn't see any reason for 3 copies of plans. It's less paper, it's less being used, it's less printing, less for us to deal with going through the office. So I would suggest changing that to 2 copies. And then adding 3 numbers, 11, 12, and 13, that would then make this section agree with 112. Number 11 would be a certificate of liability insurance naming the town of Clinton as additional insured. That appears in 112. It does not appear anywhere in 250-91. We do have some issue with this.
Yeah.
And I've been talking with Shane about it. I've been talking with the town insurance agent about it. It's no problem for a general contractor. They have commercial liability, piece of cake, right? But for the
It's
homeowner,
who
right?
has a homeowner's
Yes.
policy, they will not do
Right.
that.
And so far, we get it from most. We don't get it from Liberty Mutual. We don't get it from, I forget the other one. And largely it's because the homeowner's policy is written differently. If we,
It's the same
It-
thing as
you're
if
ensuring
they
that-
rent the park,
right,
and they want to have alcohol, most municipalities want alcohol liability specifically named that the town is additional insured, and the homeowner's policies
Right.
does not allow for that.
They won't.
We can give you a certificate saying you have insurance.
Right.
But we can't name you as an
Right.
additional insured.
Because the homeowner's
you don't
policy-
have an insurable interest.
right. The homeowner's policy does not cover just that one job, whereas the commercial liability policy covers that job. The homeowner's policy covers the whole home. So it gives the town of Clinton an additional insured status to the entire home, right? So it was a couple of ways that some insurances have dealt with that is they have made a temporary amendment to a policy and they write it specifically to that job. And we've gotten that from, I think, Liberty, that's how Liberty Mutual solved it. But the interesting thing here, the back and forth that we're currently
Well,
in
it
is,
depends. See, like Liberty Mutual does a builder's risk policy.
Okay.
So that's a different type of policy. That's not a homeowner's. That's a
Right.
builder's risk. And they do have an amendment that they can add a rider onto a home as a builder's risk, and it automatically converts into a home policy.
okay.
Very
And that-
few companies have that.
Yeah, and that's probably what we got from Liberty, right? So in talking with Shane, he is pretty adamant that we require that Clinton be additional insured. And we've talked back and forth about how hard that is to get. So he included Nicole, the town insurance agent, in the conversation, and she sent me the document that essentially lays out for the town how we should be doing this. And there's an exception in there for homeowners. And so this is something we need to work out with the town attorney, is the homeowner has to provide, I forget how it's worded, but it's essentially a certificate of the homeowner's policy. So that's something for the town board to work out with the town attorney. But it does often prove difficult. And this is my fear, right, is we have a homeowner that comes in, they give us the exemption for workers' comp and disability, cool. They can't get us listed as additional insured. We can't issue the permit. They do the work anyway. We issue a violation. The only cure for the violation is to get a building permit. We can't give them a building permit.
You're stuck.
And then so then they stop applying, right? And we're stuck. So we want to avoid that. We don't want to be so restricted that the homeowner can't do the work.
So you got an email from Nicole that gave us some sort
Yeah, I
of
can forward that to
exception.
you. Yep.
Did Shane see that?
He was on it, yes. Yeah.
Can you forward that to me?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, send it to me too.
I mean,
Sure.
yeah, send it to all of us. I love Shane, you all know that, but he doesn't write our town code, so
Exception that.
if our insurance agent,
It's in the recommendation from our insurance
An
company. yeah.
insurance,
Yeah, that we could accept.
we're trying to
The
protect
homeowner.
ourselves from liability. That's what they do, right? That's what
yeah.
they do.
If our agent
Now,
has
to-
the wording for us. then-
Right. Now, the danger, and Dean can certainly speak to this, is it's one thing if a homeowner's putting a deck on his house, and something else if he's installing a wood stove, right? wood stove carries more risk with it. So we want to make sure is that if we're issuing a building permit and doing inspections on a wood stove and the house burns down, what is the town's liability in that? Right, so
But
that I
they
don't know.
have to, if you as the homeowner, you're building the thing, you have to have a homeowners, right? And then that's your policy, if anybody get hurt, you're covered.
Right, but if there's an exclusion in the homeowner's policy, for example, that says some stipulation about installation of a solid fuel burning stove,
We won't, like if we insure a house, we make them fill out a special, an addendum application that specifies that they got a building permit, that they did it to code, that it was all
Okay.
done, legally and everything else,
Great.
or we won't insure it either.
yeah, as long as there's a path, right? Okay.
Good.
So I'm just kind
Even
of,
if it's there prior, the new insurance company will still ask for that same information,
Okay.
even though it's already there existing.
yeah, great. So I'm passing that off to you guys.
Yeah.
Thanks.
It's really all a matter of, to be a certificate holder, you have to have an insurable risk.
Mm-hmm.
The town does not have an insurable risk in
the
someone
home.
else's property,
Right.
someone else's home.
Right, yeah, only to that project is why the commercial policy works. 'cause
So
then it's done.
we can say, yeah, you're insured, so like I write certificates all the time, but, so I write out a certificate saying they have insurance.
Mm-hmm.
And you will be notified if that insurance should cancel midterm in the process,
Mm-hmm.
so that you're alerted to, they no longer have the insurance. That's the only notice that you're really getting.
Yeah.
But you don't have a right to any protections of that policy. So even liability-wise, the town's not protected for liability on someone's homeowner's policy. But I don't know where the liability would lie on the town. The town is not liable for someone doing work and having a contractor come over and slip and fall off the roof or whatever. How's the town liable for someone doing work and falling off a roof?
My initial question in this is, why is it there at all, right? And I still don't fully understand. So it does protect the town from the liability of, as I understand it, what might happen during an inspection process. But as a non-insurance guy, it's.
Yeah, I
it's not
would
my
say
thing,
that
so.
if, let's say you as, the building inspector went out there and you didn't, they put 2x6s instead of 2x12s and the roof collapsed and killed somebody, now is the town liable
Right.
for their error in not, assessing that the construction was done to code?
Right.
That's the only, but still, that wouldn't really be the homeowner's liability, it'd be the town's liability.
That's what I would think. So I
So
don't know.
then we don't have to get the insurance if the homeowner is doing the work, because they have their homeowner.
Well, currently we do, and this is where we have the problem between the other sections of code in 250.
Right.
In 112, it specifically says we need it. So which do we follow? We end up trying to marry both and.
Yeah,
come up with
I've just had a
compromise.
question about the whole thing
Yeah.
because of where is the town's liability?
Right.
And I don't see
Ultimately,
that,
that's the question to answer.
I don't see that the town is liable. I've never seen a town being sued for someone else's,
Yeah.
So it could be that with homeowners, you wouldn't even ask for it, it's only for.
But even if a contractor was doing it,
contractors.
I don't think the contractor, the town would be liable for the contractor. We're not hiring the contractor, we're not.
Yeah, yeah, and like I said, that ultimately, that is the question, is why is it there?
We
But-
can get those for contractors, so it's not an issue, but I still don't see where the liability is.
Yeah.
So I don't see why we'd have to.
Right.
But every town asks for it.
Yeah, so I'll forward that email thread, including the attachment from Nicole, and you guys can review it and see where we go.
Shane takes it well when we tell him he's wrong, it's all right.
So number 12 would be certificates of workers' compensation and disability benefits or completed certificate of attestation of exemption from New York State. And that's the New York State form that a homeowner fills out if they're doing the work themselves, because they're not required to have
And the
workers'
contractor if they're
compensation.
self-employed. But
Exactly, same thing in no employees.
That whole
right.
process has changed too. That's
Yeah.
ridiculous as well.
Yeah, it's, you just go online and click, 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 and then you get it, so.
Well, it just made it more difficult. Usually, years ago, 20 years ago, a contractor would just fill out the form
Mm-hmm.
and hand it to the department. Now you got to go on their website and create the form.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
have to give us something
Yeah.
that they're accepting.
And then number 13 would be the required fee is provided in 112-5.
And you'll see all these when I send it to you.
Yeah. And then, so then in little b, so number 1, little b, when clearly not applicable, it says certain application requirements. I would eliminate certain application, and right, so it reads, when clearly not applicable, requirements 1 through 9 listed in this subsection may be waived, because the others are clearly applicable. So,
So the little b's being totally rewritten?
no, little b would just eliminate certain application, and then add 1 through 9 after
We have to
requirements.
change the numbers, though. Because it goes from B to 2. Oh, I see, section 2 is different.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
Never mind.
yeah.
Sorry.
We're adding some in.
Yep.
Or potentially adding some in.
Right.
So then in section 2, paragraph 2, sorry, change 3 copies to 2 copies. And third line from the bottom, after mechanical, add plumbing. So it says details of structural, mechanical, plumbing, and electrical work. This is on what's required to be shown on the plans. And sometimes we'll get plans that don't show the plumbing. We want to require that they show plumbing if they're going to put it in there, right? Even though a plumbing inspection isn't necessarily required, we want to know what they're planning, right? And then in number 4, in the last line, it says, this is about plans and specifications. It says shall bear the signature of the person responsible for the design, and then there are some exceptions, right? What I would like to add at the end of number 4, instead of it saying accept applications for, to instead say accept, comma, at the discretion of the building inspector, applications for A is alterations costing less than $20,000 and not involving changes affecting structural or public safety. B is farm buildings except dwellings. It's C, I would eliminate completely. So basically what they're saying is that if you are doing an alteration that costs under $20,000 and doesn't affect anything structural, you still need a building permit, but you don't have to have certified plans. You can draw those plans yourself. If you are a farmer putting up a new shed on your farm, you can draw the plans yourself. It doesn't have to be done by an engineer. You still need a building permit.
Now, you said in A, how much?
Right now, A currently says 20,000.
I know,
We
but we
changed
changed it
that
to
to
30.
Oh, we did, okay, thanks. Okay. And then eliminate C, because I think that any residential building, if somebody's going to be living in it, well, a residential building doesn't necessarily mean dwelling, I suppose, right? So, so then I'm curious about the 1,500 square foot area. That's a big building, right? Our minimum dwelling is 400 square feet. So I don't really see why C is in there, you know? So I would just get rid of C.
If you change number 6, a building permit shall be void if construction is not started within a period of 1
Yes.
year. To what?
But by
We're not there
eliminating
yet.
C, then someone it would have an indefinite size building that they could build.
No, this is an exception to needing engineered plans, stamped plans. So any residential building then would require stamped engineered plans.
I thought we were saying that we should allow for some, like sheds and stuff like that. Why would you need engineered plans?
No, that would be only for a farm building.
Yeah, so-
The exception for farm buildings.
What about the homeowner that just wants to put in a shed for their lawnmower?
I think there's got to be a size.
Yeah, and maybe it's just the 1,500 square foot that changes. I mean, you don't need a permit for one accessory structure that's under 120 square feet. You don't even need a permit at all, right?
We're changing that to 144 to match the state code.
Okay, great. So you get that automatically, you don't need a permit.
So that's fine.
So maybe here,
Yeah,
we
these
just
are
make a
just-
smaller square footage.
Yeah, we just got to remember, this is just exceptions to engineered plans.
Right,
Right.
right. How big are we comfortable with somebody building
It says a
structure?
yeah, a residential building. I think any residential building should have.
I think that's his point, is that if it's going to be residential.
But I'm saying, if you add on an addition, let's say 400 square feet or 200 square feet, do we really need architectural plans? And if it's meeting the codes that,
Well, no, because it would be covered under A.
It's not under
That would,
amount.
that would be covered under A, I think.
30,000?
You don't think so? My prices are.
I mean, I guess if the 30,000 is,
Yeah.
I think costing $300 a square foot, so how many square feet you're going to get before you get to 30,000.
30,000?
That would be 1,000,
1,000 square feet.
1,000 square feet.
Yeah,
Less than.
yeah. So,
Okay, so let's see.
yeah, well, in residential building, it doesn't necessarily mean a dwelling. A shed on a residential property is considered a residential building. Right?
That's that.
Your garage, your accessory structure is a residential building.
100 square feet. Just check the math.
So
What if you're
right.
What if you're doing it yourself, and it doesn't cost you $300 a square foot?
if it's under $30,000 and doesn't affect structural or public safety, then
Right,
you
but
would
that's
not
going
need
to give you a
engineered
lot,
plans.
conceivably would give you a lot more than 1,000 square feet.
But it's not 1,000 square feet, it's
Yeah.
100 square feet.
30,000 divided by 300 square foot is 100.
Is it- is it-
Yeah. Which you would need a permit for anyway. If you had,
Yeah.
for one of them, anyway.
So where do we land there?
Okay.
We're taking it out?
I'm fine with leaving, taking C out. I mean, I feel like it's a residential building, it should have, that's me.
And it does, in 1B, it says when clearly not applicable, requirements listed in this subsection may be waived by the building inspector or zoning administrator. So it does allow for, you've got a contractor that does this for a living in his home, is going to be doing, building a shed or a garage.
I've seen things
Right.
on napkins, and I've
Right.
seen, with the CAD system.
Right,
you
yeah.
know.
So the building inspector could still waive that requirement, right? Okay. So then in 5, I would add, anywhere that it says building inspector, add or zoning administrator. Because the things that are covered in 5 are things that we each look at. Some of the things the building inspector doesn't look at, like it mentions in here, that it shall conform to the Dutchess County Department of Health regulations. That's something that the zoning administrator deals with. Drainage and erosion control, that's zoning administrator. So if we just simply add zoning administrator to either, and because in the powers and duties, each one acts as the other, it just closes that.
You'd want to make that change throughout.
It only appears in 5, that way. Most everything else is relevant to the building inspector
Oh, is that,
specifically.
oh, okay, so
Yeah.
it's only in that section.
Right. And then I suggested eliminating 6, which says the building inspector may require the applicant to name the town as an additional insured during the construction period, because that's going to be covered in the page previously, once that's decided. In C, it says the third line, whatever construction work is being performed, building permits shall be issued in duplicate, and one copy shall be posted conspicuously on the premises affected whenever construction work is being performed. What that means literally is that if it's under construction and nobody's swinging a hammer or doing any work, you can pull that building permit down, which is not what we want. So what I would suggest instead is posted conspicuously on the premises affected from the commencement of construction until said permit is satisfied with a certificate of occupancy or revoked.
You'll have it all written down
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Sorry, then there were 2 other cases in D where it would add building inspector or zoning administrator. And then that's it for that one.
D.
You said it should be zoning administrator in D or not?
In D,
Oh, okay.
yes.
And
D, yeah.
or-
D.
Building inspector or zoning administrator.
It has that 3
happens
times.
twice.
It has that twice in D.
Yeah.
3 times.
3 times.
But no, in the last time, it's not, because the building inspector shall keep a file of such
Oh,
disapproval.
okay.
That one should stay with the building inspector, because it's about the building. For us, it's the same office, so it doesn't really matter, but,
But it might not be
Right.
that way always.
right.
All right, you said you had one more after this, and you got 16 minutes.
250-98.
250 what?
98?
It's a big section. Okay.
So I only printed out the relevant pages because it's a really long section. It looks long because some of them only have one word on them.
Okay.
So, 25098, starting on page 3,
Of the changes or the original?
in the changed one, if I'm looking at the right one. So actually, starting on page 2, number 2, meetings.
I don't
3
have that.
meetings. Oh, no, sorry. So page 3, under number 3, minutes. The zoning board of appeals shall keep minutes of its proceedings showing the vote of each member upon every question. It should be each question.
That's
Because
easy.
you want it noted on each question. Right?
Oh, you're
It's just-
talking
it's
about
just
page-
grammatically.
page 2.
Page 3, sorry.
No, page 2, number 3.
Oh,
It-
on mine it's page 3.
Yeah, it depends which one you
Oh, I
look
see.
at.
But it
Okay.
has different versions, so.
Upon each question?
Yeah.
Right. And then, number 7, agricultural data statement. And this is really, should be throughout, that farm operations should be capitalized. And then halfway down, it says farm operation or other property. I think it
Hold
should
on,
be, sorry, no,
You're,
number 7.
Yeah.
Page 3, bottom. Or other property with,
Right. And I think it should say, or a property with boundaries.
other property, you're going to change to or?
No, instead of other property,
because
it should
6
be
is required
or
by
a
code.
property. So other should be a.
Okay.
And then, I don't know if this was just a version thing, but in number 10, it says default denial.
Yep.
So
Okay.
10 being default denial. yeah.
So halfway down, it says determination of the enforcement officer within the time allowed by subsection 10 herein. Should that be 9 under decisions? That's the only time frame I see. It's just referring to its own,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. So I think the intention was for it to be 9. Okay.
I think we deleted a line or number and that's.
Right, yeah, yeah. And then on section C, number 2, so the version I have, it shows that the header for section C, administrative review was crossed out and it was changed to appeals. Is that correct?
C2, well.
No, sorry,
C is
just
appeals.
C.
Yeah.
Okay,
It
great.
used to be administrative review.
Now it's appeals.
yes.
Okay, yes, I like that. So then in number 2, violations, it says, upon written report or receipt of a notice of violation or an order to cease and desist from the zoning administrator and/or building inspector for a violation of this chapter, the zoning board of appeals shall not review. What that means literally is that notice of violation would be issued to the zoning board of appeals, which I don't think was the intent. So I would add, after chapter, concerning any application before it. So then it reads, upon written report or receipt of a notice of violation or an order to cease and desist from the zoning administrator and/or building inspector for a violation of this chapter concerning any application before it, comma, the zoning board of appeals shall not review. Then it's just more specific that they can't review an application that's in violation. Unless, and the next sentence says, unless that it cures, that's where they're there to cure the violation. All right. And then on the next line, it says, hold public meetings or public hearings, comma, and shall take no action regarding, I would change "and" to such, so that you're referencing that application that is in violation. Then in,
Do that again?
um,
Shall take no action?
Regarding such
Oh,
application.
regarding such an, okay. Got it.
and then in E, variances, number 1, area variances, is organized in a way that makes sense, or it's easy to read. Number 2 doesn't follow that same pattern. So number 1, you have A, B, and then B's got little numbers, and then you have C. And number 2, you've got everything crammed into one paragraph, and then an A and a B and a C and a D, and then you have a whole number 3. But that number 3 is actually approval and conditions of use variances, which is number 2. So that's laid out on the page that I gave you, Michael. in
Yeah, the
terms of-
thing you get scanned will have a whole new numbering scheme for you.
Yeah, and then it just matches.
nothing changed in terms of its content.
Right, just easier to read.
Can I just say something? The county or the state has got, really a thing about the variance, like how many factors, 5.
That's all in there, yep.
All the stuff and everything. And about the appeals that you're saying, the wisdom of interpretation, I think the county or the governor, the state, it says administrative instead of appeals.
Well, according to town law, a zoning board of appeals can be appellate only, or it can have a quasi-judicial role or a judicial role, right? And our town law says specifically that it's a quasi-judicial role and it is an appellate body only.
Yeah,
So the interpretations that they make are relevant specific to the application that's in front of them. They're not writing law.
Right.
The town board writes the law.
Specific to that application.
Right, right.
So do we still have interpretation or not?
The interpretation of the law relevant to the application in front of them only.
So you know how we have area variance, use variance, and interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
So what is in place now?
So if somebody has an application, for example, for an area variance, and the zoning board and they get denied because they want a 4th accessory structure and they already have 3. And so then they're going to go to in front of the zoning board of appeals. Then the zoning board of appeals is going to look at the language of the denial, and they're going to make an interpretation of the way the law is written and see if they agree with the language of the denial.
I know, but what's the called? Is it an area? Is it a use variance? Is it a administrative? Is it interpretation? You know, like there's categories when.
Everything is based on appeal. So it was already decided that the phrase.
So you're gonna call it as appeal, you know?
Right.
Area variance, use, and then appeal.
Nope, those are 3 different things.
I know, I just think that we gotta check. Like when you go to the county, when we're going, Elliot and Dean, you know that, when we're going for the variance, I think from the state and from the county, you know, there's the categories to follow.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, you know, I can check what really the guidelines from the state.
In the revised version, we're going backwards now to A2 says the composition of the zoning board of appeals consists of 7 members unless changed in accordance with 267 of the town law. And then the revision process, it was added pursuant to section 10 subdivision 1(2)(d)(3) of the municipal home rule law. This chapter supersedes the provisions of town law 267 subdivision 2 in its application to the town of Clinton. And the town board has the right to do that, right? So the town board sets its boards and gives its boards the powers and duties that the town board thinks that that board should have, right? It uses obviously town laws as guidance, and there's some things that it has to adhere to, but the town law, New York State town law specific to zoning boards of appeals gives that leeway to the town board. So I don't know, I wasn't part of the process, but I do believe that this is the right way for it to be worded.
So there's no change?
No, not to number 2, I was just answering Ali's question. Yeah.
Okay.
So sorry, then we can go back to,
H, I think is your last one.
thanks.
You're welcome.
F, G, H. So in H, non-conforming uses, the zoning board of appeals shall hear and decide any application for change. It currently says request. I would suggest changing it to application, because if it's request, then the way that this can be literally written, interpreted is that any resident that wanted to change a non-conforming use could simply make a request and ask the ZBA, as opposed to actually having to fill out an application. So if we change the word to application. And thought there was something else. Oh, sorry, I did miss one. In C1,
C1?
yes.
Oh, you sunk my battleship.
Yep.
1, 2, 3, the end of the 4th line, it says, "It shall also hear and decide all matters referred to it or upon which it is required to pass under any such law, comma, including interpretations of the language, comma, intent of such law, comma, or interpretation of the location of zoning district boundaries by the zoning administrator or the building inspector, without a comma after boundaries, then what this sentence could be inferred to mean is that the only thing the zoning administrator and the building inspector could put in front of the zoning board of appeals would be zoning district boundary interpretations. When you put a comma there, then it makes all of those examples of things that the zoning administrator or the building inspector can ask for interpretation on.
So comma after boundaries.
Right. That was it.
Unless that was the intent.
It doesn't seem that it would be, because if, for example, I have a question on the interpretation of the language, I wouldn't be able to put that to the ZBA. Or if the planning board makes a decision on a special use permit that the building inspector thinks is going to create an issue, he wouldn't be able to take that to the ZBA.
4 minutes to spare. Yep.
Is that really true about the ZBA member allowed only 3 consecutive absent? Maybe we should put in there at the end, except, who knows, maybe there's some medical issue or something.
It isn't automatic. It's at the discretion of the town board.
Right.
So the town board would review the
We are
case.
very, very reasonable people, so.
Yeah.
So let's leave it.
Thank you.
So before we say goodnight,
Yeah.
what are, in 2 weeks, we're just going to revisit all the things that we
Yes.
talked about, just to be sure.
So what I'd like to do is, I'm not in my office until about noon tomorrow.
Do you want me to type those things up?
Well, no, what I was going to do is ask Kathy, I'm going to leave this on her desk tonight, ask her to scan this to all of us tomorrow morning. So by the time I'm in the office, we should already all have them. And then,
Will the handwriting come out in the scan? That's
I
why-
think so.
That's why I said.
That's a printed, that's a
This
printed
is
thing
actually
from my
printed.
iPad.
It's
Yeah.
his handwriting, but he writes it on his screen and it prints it.
Right.
It'll be fine.
Because if it's not, I could just retype it and she can scan and
just
send out
scan it.
type copies. That's what I was going to suggest.
Oh,
If the handwriting
And
is,
Michael has the Word documents, because I gave him all.
yeah.
If it takes a day or 2 more, I think that's fine.
Do you want to type all of these?
well, if it's easier to read, then I'll take a few minutes. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, if we type all those in with the track changes, so then when
Yeah,
you
exactly.
email them to all of us,
oh yeah, this is not.
I
big
think
deal.
all of us
I can
should
do this.
probably,
I can do this.
I know we all do our homework in between these sessions, but we should all make sure we look at these before the next one, so we can maybe in the next session just say, yeah, we approve of all this, or if we have issues with it, we change it. And then,
And
Off
those
to the
are
county
only-
it goes.
Those are the only things that we're coming back to, right? Oh, well, no, we sorted the animal husbandry, so we're good.
Right, yeah, the only other thing would be, I'll look at the camping and see if the short-term rental already takes care of that, then that's a non-issue. And then the new legislation we talked about for farms, are we doing that as part of 250, or we're gonna do that the way short-term rentals was done as its
so
own
you wrote the
thing?
notes on that, right?
No, he wanted to write
Right.
'Cause
we-
separate sections to
Oh.
add in for farm, bar, farm, restaurant, farm.
Right, so that we have legislation that allows for those uses, because Egg and
Are you
Market
gonna have them
says.
done by next?
Well, that's what I mean, if we're gonna submit it as a separate thing, because I really want to get Egg and Market's approval on it.
Does it make sense, is it better to have it separate so that it's easy for somebody to reference? They're not digging.
Well, it would still be in 250, the same way short-term rentals is.
Right.
It would just be written as a whole new code, the way short-term rentals was. So it wouldn't change what our farming section is that you guys would approve. It would just be a new number 250 dash
Point one.
whatever. Yeah, yeah. Now, if I get everything back from Egg and Markets and they are happy with it, then maybe we can do it by 2 weeks, but.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to hold up the whole process for
Right.
that,
Yeah, I
but if we
wouldn't
can
either.
make
Right.
it happen, that
Yeah,
would be
yeah,
awesome.
we'll keep.
Yeah, and then
pushing for it.
otherwise we just pass it at some point as an
Right.
add-on,
Right, okay,
as a standalone.
okay.
Okay,
Make motion?
yeah, I'm just making sure. All right, make a motion to adjourn this meeting of the zoning revision.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried.
Can we see those amendments online, red line?